All right, good morning. Mr. Trutna here. Today is March 19th, 2020, Clovis High School. This is going to be your video solutions to Unit 11, Worksheet 1. You were assigned numbers 1 through 15, 18, 20, and 21. And as I stated in some of my correspondence through emails, I'm going to do pretty much every other problem, so I'm going to do half of them for you. So I'm going to do numbers 1 through 15, the odd numbers, and then I'll do number 20. Okay, so this is the worksheet right here. Here is your worksheet 1 of Unit 11. Sorry, I'm going to walk over here for a second, adjust the lights. Okay, I'm back. All right, so let's get going. So in number 1 right here, it says find the value of c in the expression that completes the square. Okay, so that's the first thing that we're going to do, is we're going to do something that's called completing the square, where we're going to find the c value, and then we're going to write the problem in factored form. So when you're doing numbers 1 through 9, there are two things that you're always going to be doing. The first thing is you're going to be taking the given expression, which in number 1 is x squared plus 12x plus some value. And this value right here is going to be your c value. So where it says where c equals and then has that line, we're going to find this c value to do a process which is called complete the square. Okay, so here's how you do that. Here's how you complete the square. What you do is you take this middle value right here, which is known as the b value. Okay, so remember that whenever we have an expression in standard form, which is what all of numbers 1 through 9, actually what are all the expressions in this worksheet are in standard form, we have an a value, which would be right here, which in this case is 1. We have a b value, which in this expression's case would be 12, and then we have a c value. So to do what's called complete the square, we take the b value, which in this case is 12, and we divide it by 2, and you get a result, so that's going to be 6, and then you take that result and you raise it to the second power, or you square it. Okay, and that's going to be equal to 36. And whatever that is equal to, that's what you're going to put right here in the expression for your c value. So number 1, to do the process that is called complete the square, our c value would be 36. How did we get 36? We took the b value, 12. We divided it by 2, we got a result which was 6, then we took that result 6 and we raised it to the second power, or we squared it, and that result is our c value. Okay, so that's the first part we're going to do, and you're doing this in numbers 1 through 9. Then the second part you do in numbers 1 through 9 is you're going to take this expression right here, x squared plus 12x plus 36, okay, this expression that we made, and you're going to write it in factored form. Okay, so what you're going to have to do is you are then going to take this expression and you are going to factor it. All right, so how do we factor a trinomial that has no leading number in front of the x squared? Well, that's where the strategy that we use is we make our t-chart. Okay, and in my t-chart, just to ring a bell, what you do is you take the c value, which is 36, and you have to find the distinct pairs of numbers that multiply to make 36. Okay, so in other words, 1 times 36, 2 times 18, 3 times 12, and 4 times 9. All right, all of those are your distinct pairs of numbers that multiply to 36. Now, one of those pairs will be your factor, and your factor will be whichever pair adds to make your b value, which is 12. Okay, and I forgot a pair, as you can see. I did that on purpose because none of these add to make 12. We forgot one, and it's 6 times 6. All right, and there is your factors. 6 times 6 is 36. 6 plus 6 is equal to 12. Okay, so that means that when I factor the trinomial x squared plus 12x plus 36, it is going to factor into the expression x plus 6 in parentheses multiplied by the expression x plus 6. Okay, why x plus 6 and x plus 6? Well, because 6, positive 6 and positive 6 were my factors. Okay, so then what we want to do next is we just want to simplify on how to rewrite this. So this means I have two sets of x plus 6's. So this would become x plus 6 to the second power. Okay, so that would be how you do each problem. So in number 1, we have we completed the square by filling in the 36 there, and then the second part is we wrote the trinomial that we had after we completed the square in factored form. Okay, and when you write out the factored form, make sure to write it, if you have the same value twice, if you have two sets of x plus 6's, make sure to write it as one set to the second power. All right, moving on to number 3. Once again, I'm doing every other problem. So number 3, we are given x squared minus 6x plus, and then we need to complete the square by finding the c value. So how do we do that? Once again, you take the b value, which is right here. It is negative 6, and the process that you do is you divide that b value by 2, which is negative 6. Divided by 2 is negative 3. You get a result, and then you take that result and you raise it to the second power. And whatever that equals, that's going to be your c value. So negative 3 to the second power is positive 9. Okay, so that right there, that process is once again called complete the square. Okay, then we're going to write this trinomial x squared minus 6x plus 9 in factored form. All right, so how do I do that? So to write it in factored form, I'm going to make my t-table. I'm going to take this value right here called the c value, which is 9, and I need to find all the distinct pairs of numbers that multiply to make 9. So that would be 1 times 9, and that would be 3 times 3. That is it. And one of those is going to be my factors for this trinomial, and it's whichever one adds to make the b value, which is negative 6. Okay, so how could I make two of these numbers multiply to make positive 9 but add to make negative 6? Well, if you change both of the 3's to negative, you can see that negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9, and negative 3 plus negative 3 is negative 6. So that means my two factors, when I factor, I'm going to get x minus 3 as one of my expressions for my factor times the other factor, which is also x minus 3. So that means I have two sets of x minus 3's, so I'm going to write my answer, or my factored form, as x minus 3 to the second power. Okay? So my c value when I completed the square was positive 9, and then my factored form was the quantity x minus 3 to the second power. All right, moving on to number 5. We are given x squared minus 14x plus, and I'm going to have to find the c value for this particular expression. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, once again, I take the b value, which is negative 14. I'm going to divide it by 2. I'm going to get a result that is negative 7. Then I'm going to take that result and I'm going to raise it to the second power. And whatever that equals, that goes right here in your c value. So that would be positive 49. So that is the process of what we call complete the square. So when I complete the square, I get x squared minus 14x plus 49. And now I'm going to, my next step is I'm going to write this trinomial in factored form. Okay? So how do I factor that? Well, remember, to factor this trinomial, that means I'm going to set up my t-chart, and I'm going to take my c value, and I need to find two distinct pairs of numbers that multiply to make 49. Well, that could be 1 times 49, or that could be 7 times 7, okay? And then one of these are going to be my factors, and it's going to be the pair that adds to make negative 14, my b value. Okay, so what could I change two of these numbers to make them multiply to make positive 49? but also add to make negative 14. If you change both of the 7's to negative, you see that negative 7 times negative 7 is 49, and negative 7 plus negative 7 is negative 14. So that means I have found my factors, okay? So how do I write my factors then? Well, the way that you would write your factors would be, you would go parentheses, and you would write x minus 7, because negative 7 is one of your factors, and then you would go start another parentheses, and your other factor would be also x minus 7. Okay, so your factored form would be x minus 7 times x minus 7, which means we have two sets of x minus 7's, and you would write your factored form as quantity x minus 7 to the second power. There we go. So that's how you would do number 5. All right, moving on to number 7. Actually it's number 5 again, but really this is number 7. That's why I paused. It threw me off for a second. Okay, so this would actually be number 7 here. All right, so we have x squared plus 6x plus, and now we're going to complete the square to fill in my c value. So what's the process? Take the b value, which is 6, okay, divide it by 2, get a result, that's 3, take that result and raise it to the second power. That goes right there for your c value, so your c value would be 9. What's this process called? This process is called completing the square. Now we're going to write this trinomial in its factored form. Okay, so we're going to factor this trinomial. So how do we do that? Well, we set up our t-table. And by the way, you don't have to draw the t-table every time. If you can find the factors in your head, then you could just go ahead and write the two factors, okay? But what's the process of doing it, of factoring this trinomial? So we take the c value, which is positive 9, and we need to make a list of the distinct pairs of numbers that multiply to make positive 9. There's only two. It's either 1 times 9 or it's 3 times 3. Now, one of those pairs will be my factor, and the factor will be whichever pair adds up to make your b value, which is positive 6. Well, you can see that's 3 plus 3. So my factors are positive 3 and positive 3. So the way you write that is you would go parentheses, and you would write the quantity x plus 3. In one of the parentheses, that's for that positive 3. Then the other factor would be another parentheses multiplied by the first parentheses, and that would be also x plus 3. And because I have two sets of x plus 3's, the way we write that is as one set of x plus 3's to the second power. That would be in factored form. Okay? All right. Are any of you guys, as I'm doing this, seeing a shortcut on how to go about just going straight from this trinomial which is called completing the square, straight to your factors? Okay, I'm not going to tell you the shortcut, but if you see the shortcut, you could skip pretty much all of this process, and once you have completed the square and you see the shortcut, you could pretty much write out your factored form. Okay, then we get to number 9, and number 9 is a little bit trickier because we're going to end up with an odd number. Okay, so same process though. So I'm going to complete the square. So I'm going to take the b value, which is 7, and I'm going to divide it by 2. Now here is my suggestion. Because 2 does not divide into 7, and if you got a result, you would get 3.5. Don't go into decimals. Go ahead and just leave your answer as a fraction if it doesn't divide out. So 7 over 2, I'm going to say the result is 7 over 2. Then, remember, then you square that result. And whatever that is, that goes right there into your c value. Well, 7 over 2 to the second power, since 7 to the second power is 49, and since 2 to the second power is 4, that means 7 over 2 to the second power is 49 fourths. Okay, and I'm just going to leave my answer in fractions in order to figure this out here. Okay, and then what I'm going to do now is I'm now going to factor this trinomial right here. Okay, now here's where knowing the shortcut, how the shortcut worked. I told you just a second ago I wasn't going to tell you what the shortcut is. Now I'm going to tell you. Okay, so if you notice, let's go over here to number 7. which was not number 5. All right, so if you notice, my factors were x plus 3 to the second power. So notice the number that went inside this parentheses was the exact result of what we got when we took the b value and we divided it by 2. 6 divided by 2 was 3. This became x plus 3 squared. Look at number 3. We got x minus 3 squared. Notice right here, negative 6 divided by 2 was negative 3. So we got x minus 3 squared. Notice in number 1, when we divided the b value by 2, we got 6, and my factors were x plus 6 squared. So what I'm telling you is that we know that this, when we complete the square, we're going to, the lights just went out on me. Hang on 1 second. There we go. I'm doing this in my classroom. If there's no movement, the lights go out. Okay, plus I was heating up my Egg McMuffin this morning. All right, so anyhow, if you notice, whatever the result is that after you divide by 2, that's what's going to be the value that goes inside your parentheses. So this is going to be x, and then what was 7 over 2? When I divided it, was the result, it was 7 over 2. So it was a positive 7 over 2. So that means my factored form is going to be x plus 7 over 2 squared. Okay? And that's how you can kind of avoid having to deal with decimals, and you're still going to have fractions and stuff like that. All right? Okay, then we get down, so hopefully that all makes sense. So that's going to be important because then we get down to numbers, when we get to numbers 10 through 21. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do 2 things. We're going to write the following function in vertex form by completing the square. Okay, so we're going to put this function in vertex form, and we're going to do the process of completing the square. And then in part B, once we have this expression or this equation in vertex form, we're going to identify the vertex. So we're going to find the vertex, okay? All right, so there were previous notes on this, but I'm going to walk you through this. All right, so here's how we're going to do it. Going to number 11. We have y equals x squared minus 10x minus 26. So here's going to be your first step. You're going to write the y equals, and then you're going to start a parentheses. Put the x squared term, put the minus 10x term in the parentheses, leave a gap, okay, always leave a gap, and then put the c value, the minus 26, outside your parentheses. This is going to be your first step. So what we're doing is we're taking number 11, which is in standard form, and we're going to convert it into what we call vertex form, okay? And we're going to do that by completing the square. So now we're going to do the process of what we did in numbers 1 through 9 for the parentheses here. So notice what we're doing is we are missing this part right here. Think of what's inside the parentheses just like what we just did in numbers 1 through 9. Okay, so we're going to complete the square. So how do we do that? Well, we take the b value, which is negative 10. We divide it by 2. We get a result. That's negative 5. We square that result, and whatever that equals, that's what we're going to put right here. So we're going to put a plus 25 inside the parentheses. And that's going to be that's the process called completing the square. Now, here's the trick to this problem. I just kind of randomly added a 25 to my equation. So then outside the equation, to balance it out, we need to subtract a 25. Okay, really what we're saying is we're saying, hey, I decided to add 25 here by doing a process by completing the square, but I really want this entire equation to just be equal to the equation I started with, so I'm going to minus 25 here. So think about it, what's plus 25 minus 25? That's just 0. So if you mentally cross both of these 25s out, wouldn't this equation just look like what you started with? Yes, so this equation is the same exact equation as what we started with. Okay, then we're going to take what's inside the parentheses, and now we're going to factor the parentheses. Here's where you could use the shortcut, or you could actually factor. Okay, for number 11, I will actually factor. So I'm going to draw my t-table, if my pen decides to write. There we go. I'm going to take the C value, which is 25, and I have to write the distinct pairs of numbers that multiply to make 25. There's only two, 1 times 5 and 5 times 5, and then one of those are my factors, and it would be the one that adds to make negative 10. Okay, so how would we make these? If we made both those 5's negative, you could see I have my factors. So that means that my parentheses here, when I write it out, I'm going to get y equals, and then x squared minus 10x plus 25 will factor into x minus 5 times x minus 5, and then outside here, negative 26 minus 25. I'm just going to simplify that, so that is negative 51. Okay, so remember, how many sets of x minus 5's do we have? We have 2 of them, and so we're going to have parentheses x minus 5 to the second power minus 51, and that right there, that equation is what we call vertex form. Okay? So essentially what we did in number 11 is we took a standard form of a quadratic, we did a process called completing the square, and we changed it into vertex form. That now allows me to tell what the vertex is. So my vertex form is y equals quantity x minus 5 to the second power minus 51, and then so that would make my vertex. Remember, when we have vertex form, we have this value is called the h value, this value is called the k value, and the h and the k value are your vertex. But remember, for the h value, you have to think opposite. So if you see a minus 5, that means your vertex is positive 5. Okay, your h value is your x for your vertex. Then your k value is whatever you see. So that means my vertex in number 11 would be positive 5, negative 51. Okay, moving on to number 13. We're given the standard form of the quadratic, y equals x squared plus 4x plus 12. All right, so I'm going to change this into vertex form by completing the square. So here's the process. Write the y equals, start a parentheses, put the x squared part, and put the plus 4x part. So in other words, put the a and the b part in the parentheses, leave a gap, put the c part outside the parentheses. Now we are going to complete the square. We're going to fill in our c value to complete the square. Okay, so how do we do that? We take this b value, which is 4, we divide it by 2, get a result, then we take that result and we square it, and that's the number that goes right there. Now, because I just put a plus 4 inside the parentheses, outside the parentheses to balance it out, I have to put a minus 4. That would really just zero out those 4's, which would just leave me with what I started with. Okay? Now I'm going to factor what's inside the parentheses. I'm going to factor this trinomial, put it in factored form. So I'm going to make my t-table. Okay? I'm going to have to find 2 numbers that multiply to make positive 4 in my t-table, and they're also going to have to add to make positive 4. And once again, if you know the shortcut, you already know the factored forms. So there's only 2 pairs of numbers, distinct numbers, that multiply to make 4. It's 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. And then my factors would be which pair adds to make positive 4 as well, and that's 2 and 2. So that means when I factor my trinomial here, I'm going to get y equals, I'm going to have a parentheses, x plus 2, that's for my first factor, and then another parentheses, x plus 2, that's for my second factor, and then out here I'm going to simplify. Positive 12 minus 4 is positive 8. Okay, so how many pairs of x plus 2's do I have? I have 2 of them, and that's going to give me my vertex form. So I'm going to get y equals, I have 2 pairs of x plus 2's, so I'm going to have an x plus 2 squared and then a plus 8. There's my vertex form for number 13. Okay, that makes my h value positive 2, that makes my k value positive 8, and then remember your h and your k are your vertex coordinates, but remember for the h you have to think opposite. So, since the h value is showing as a positive 2, that really means we put a negative 2 here. Since the k value is shown as a positive 8, you put a positive 8 there. You only think opposite for 8. So my vertex would be the coordinates -2, positive 8. Okay. Number 15, y equals x squared minus 12x minus 8. So I'm going to do the same process in number 15. I'm going to, first, I'm going to start writing it out. So I'm going to write the y equals, I'm going to put a parentheses, put the a part, the x squared part, and the b part, the minus 12x, inside the parentheses, leave a space, and then the c part put outside the parentheses, and put a plus here, and we're going to complete the square to fill in that value. Okay, and it'll always turn out to be a plus. Whenever we're doing a complete the square, we're always going to turn it, that will always turn out to be a positive number, so I can put a plus here. So how do I do that? I take this number right here, -12, which we call the b value. I divide it by 2. That gives me a result of -6. Then that result, I square it, and whatever that equals, that goes right there, which is a positive 36. Since I just kind of like wrote a random, it's not random, but since I kind of dropped a positive 36 here, out here I have to make it a -36 to balance out the equation. Okay, so now I'm going to factor this equation right here. Okay, so I'm going to do the shortcut for number 15. I already know what it's going to factor into. I'm going to have a y equals, and I know that I'm going to have two sets of parentheses. Okay, so what are the two parentheses going to be? They're going to be the same number twice. This always happens whenever I do completing the square, and the number is going to be whatever the result was after I divided by 2, which was -6. So my two factors are going to be x minus 6 and x minus 6, okay? And then outside, I'm going to simplify this. -8 minus 36 is -44. Okay, I have two sets of x minus 6's. That gives me my vertex form of y equals x minus 6 to the second power minus 44. And now I could write the vertex. Okay, remember, this is my h value in vertex form. This is my k value. So my vertex is always hk, but for h, it's always the opposite. Okay, so since I see h as -6, I'm going to put a positive 6 for my vertex's value there, and -44. So my vertex's coordinates would be positive 6, -44. Last one, number 20. Y equals x squared plus 12x plus 24. So I'm going to start off the problem, write a y equals, put a parentheses, put x squared plus 12x, inside the parentheses, put a plus, leave a gap. We're going to fill that number in, close the parentheses, put the c value plus 24 on the outside. Okay, so now let's complete the square. So we do the same process we've been doing. We're going to take the b value, 12. We're going to divide it by 2, get a result, that's 6. Then we're going to square that, and 6 to the second power is 36, so that's complete the square. Outside the parentheses, since I put a plus 36, I need to balance it out by writing a minus 36. Okay, so now I factor this trinomial. Now once again, because I did the process of complete the square, I know that when I factor this trinomial, I'm going to get the same factors twice, and it's whatever that value is after you divide by 2, which is positive 6. So my two factors are x plus 6 and x plus 6. And then positive 24 minus 36 is -12. Okay? So now I could write my vertex form. So my vertex form would be y equals, and then I have two sets of x plus 6's, so I'm just going to express that as x plus 6 to the second power, and then I have -12. Okay? Once I have vertex form tells me my coordinates on my vertex. I'm going to take my h value, which is positive 6, but I'm going to write the opposite. That would be -6, -12. So this is telling me my vertex for my parabola would be -6, -12. There we go. Email me if you have any other questions.